start off with, I owe you an apology, a predicament, and recognition that you were right and I've been too much of a coward during this investigation.
No one here's a coward, sir, but I appreciate the apology. I just think we need to be more brave in the face of darkness. Otherwise, what's the point of this foundation?
It's something that I admire you for. Even now, I have much to learn, and sometimes in unexpected ways.
And I've learned not to speak of that demon's name unless we are both prepared. We can't risk either of us being possessed. All of our recordings and documents could be erased if that would happen. At least that's what I think. Are you okay, sir?
Yes, sorry again. Predicament, lost in thought.
Okay. Well, I suppose now that we're deep in the investigation, it's good to note that our actions of what progress we made. Obviously, from the last session, there was quite a lot that happened. Since then, we've tried to lay low for a few days. It's been strangely quiet, at least on my end. I haven't heard any more of these disappearances, but the rumors among the town are kept to a dark whisper. It's like everyone's on edge now.
Rightfully so. We've pinpointed the demonic entity that this witch cult worships, and we know the location of their altar. This means that ultimately, if things go from bad to worse, that we must face the mountain spirit ourselves. Maybe just our presence can be enough to cause the spirit to flee to another location.
Instead of banishing it for good? I'm not sure if that's the result that we want.
It may not be what we want, but we can still track its movements if it does retreat. But this is all hypothetical. Banishing spirits is hard enough, even for lesser entities. Summoning them, on the other hand, can be easier. Spirits desire to inhabit the living. Demonic spirits seek to cause harm and chaos in addition to this.
Well, then our entry will be a good lesson on how summoning spirits can turn dark really quickly, even if it's through random dares.
Indeed, very dangerous. When one calls out to any spirit for answers or curiosity, all kinds of entities can answer back. Let us hear what kind of spirits were called in this instance.
Yes, of course. This entry was given to the Mystica Obscura Foundation about 5 years ago, but remains relevant to our current investigation. The result of what happened to 4 teenage friends is, well, depressing, to say the least. These 4 friends go by their first names: Tyler, Sarah, Noah, and Rebecca. It was here in Potter's Hill in the years that not too many paranormal incidents happened, but the rumors and dark tales still spread like wildfire. The elders grew worried about the trees and their shadows, while the young kids felt shivers whenever they listened to the ghostly tales of what occurred when the years were bad. Vanishing, rituals, and even deaths of many locals made Potter's Hill a place to avoid. But those who lived there stayed, perhaps not of necessity, but rather the truth of knowing that whatever plagued this town would follow them to the ends of the earth. A curse of the ethereal realm forever trapped in the bones of the townspeople. When the 4 friends of this story began to research and listen to the ghost stories all across the town, they became interested in the topic of the supernatural. They claimed that they weren't scared of ghosts, apparitions, and the undead. It would take more than just stories to frighten them. But eventually they delved too greedily into the paranormal and, in return, got in too deep in the perils of the unknown. It began with a foolish mistake of holding a seance in one of the friends' basement when they used a Ouija board and tall black candles. At first they gathered there thinking the board was just a hoax, a joke that added to the suspicions and guesses of what lay beyond the layers of human comprehension. On a weekend night, well past midnight, the friends sat in a circle while they began to light the candles one by one. Placing the board in the center of everyone, the tension was suddenly building. The planchette was placed on the board, where they shifted it, and The planchette was placed on the board, where it shifted, just a few inches, but in a moment where no one had yet laid their fingers on it. When the planchette moved, the flames on the candles moved also. But when nothing else happened, the friends blamed it on themselves fidgeting in place or cold drafts in the basement. After all, none of them had previous paranormal incidents, so no evil spirits had followed them there. Their strength in denying the spiritual realm, or rather their stubbornness, shut out the possibility of ethereal intervention. The friends put their fingers on the planchette and began to move it around, calling out to any spirits who were there, and if they could move something. They stopped the planchette and waited for a response. Nothing. The friends scoffed and Tyler put his hands away, laughing at the idea this was all a joke. He was about to stand up when another sudden gust went through the group and their laughs were silenced. Hesitating, Tyler placed his fingers back on the planchette. Once he did, the planchette began to move and the friends gasped in shock. Sliding over to the letter B and then A, the friends watched in stunned tension. It had stopped moving for now, but the flames on the candles moved again. There was a long time when nothing happened after that, but the friends were desperate for another sign. Eventually, Sarah called out to any other spirits to move a faraway door that was in front of her and behind Rebecca. She said the command 3 times loudly, and once she finished, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a pitch-black room in front of her. She didn't want to stare into the room, but she couldn't keep her eyes off the emptiness. Suddenly, with a loud slam, the door shut instantly, and the friends were beginning to tremble. Rebecca wanted to leave, but they hadn't said goodbye on the board yet. The rest of their friends said that they had plenty of evidence and experience to know the paranormal was definitely in their presence now. But when they tried to slide the planchette to the goodbye section of the board, it wouldn't budge. The friends blamed each other and demanded that this wasn't funny. The terror was done, and it was time to end the session. Suddenly, before any of them stood up, the planchette began to move again on its own. It slid over to E, and then to L. The friends were freaking out by now. The candles were blown out all at once, and there was an almost raspy, ethereal breath that everyone could hear. The same door from behind suddenly opened and slammed shut 3 times in a row. The wood on the stairs groaned as if someone was coming down. Rebecca stood up and with an unsteady voice shouted that she was leaving immediately and raced up the stairs with her eyes closed, followed closely by Tyler and then to Noah, who looked back at Sarah but ultimately decided to go back upstairs. Sarah was the only one left in the basement. Yet, despite her own terror, she pushed with all her might to move the planchette to goodbye. It was barely moving, but some progress was made. More whispers and eerie breaths surrounded her. She could hear her friend's footsteps upstairs, sprinting out in a panic. Steadying her breath, she pushed with both hands on the planchette, finally moving it to goodbye, where she demanded the spirit to leave now and to never return. A few lingering gusts blew through the basement again, and at last a faint whisper that seemed to flow out of the window. Then all was silent again. The planchette remained where it was. Sarah packed up the board and planchette back into a box and found a dusty shelf in the corner. Putting the box there under a stack of old books, she left the board there and went upstairs. Strangely enough, she didn't feel any presence in the basement, even right after their experience, but she still booked it back upstairs and sprinted to her room. Later that night, she called her friends, who had all made it home that night. She breathed a sigh of relief. It was just a scary experience that they'd laugh about later. Or at least, that's what she thought. A few days had passed before one of her friends went through something rather dramatic, and that she wouldn't talk to until those few days had passed. The first victim was Rebecca, whose experience happened the very same night of this Ouija board session. After telling Sarah she was home, Rebecca suddenly became extremely drowsy. Something in the air wasn't right. Her head was light and her vision was dizzy. After collapsing on the bed, Rebecca tossed and turned in the night, hearing voices but always too afraid to open her eyes. Eventually she did, and what she saw terrified her. At the foot of the bed, a pale face stared at her with misty gray eyes, unblinking. Thin strands of black hair drooped over the face, and she saw that a pair of its bony fingers were wrapped around the bedpost. The second Rebecca saw this entity, she screamed, except no sound came out. Her scream was silent. She was suddenly thrown back down on the bed while her body was unable to move. Sleep paralysis. Only this time, she was wide awake. She watched this pale entity creep around the bed, now holding a tiny candle with 2 of its bony fingers, black fingernails extending like talons. She remembered hearing a raspy breathing as the entity crept forward. slowly, inducing trauma and terror. The entity got right up to her face where its breath was icy cold, and gargled a strange sentence which she couldn't understand. But once it made that sound, it blew out the candle, and it vanished completely into thin air. The invisible hold on Rebecca was released, and she sprinted out of her room immediately. However, the more people she told about this encounter, the less believable she seemed. She told anyone that would listen to her. No one but her 3 friends would believe her. Noah listened to her intently and with fear. He too had seen the same figure, just in a different way. While Noah lived the farthest from Sarah's place, he saw the face of the pale figure appear and disappear between streets, in the reflections of windows, and in the canopies of rustling trees. He had to keep his head down at all times, but he heard the faint raspy voice, gargling and just trying to speak. Noah remembered it attempted to say actual words, but always seemed to jumble the words together or finish one halfway. Either way, the voices grew louder, and everywhere he looked, he saw that pale face come closer and closer. He panicked and followed the streets the best he could while looking down. Footsteps were heard behind him, running at a faster pace than him. He began to sprint as fast as he could until he rounded a corner and saw the nearby playground. There, behind the swing set, was the entity, hiding in a thick bush. It held the same small candle in its crooked fingers. The entity stared at Noah before giving a hushed signal with one of its fingers across its cracked lips. It smiled before blowing out the candle and vanishing into the night. Noah stood in absolute horror before stumbling his way home and crashing in his room. He stayed wide awake the rest of the night while he and Tyler shared their stories over a phone call. Tyler claimed that he saw the entity as well, though not as horrifying as the others. Tyler returned home without any incident and thought the whole thing was set up by his friends. While he was in bed watching movies late into the night, he began to notice something strange. Extra faces in the movies that he'd never noticed before. At first he brushed it off before he saw the same one over and over again. The pale face of the entity. It appeared far in the scene originally, but the closer to the ending of the movie, the closer the face would appear until the entire screen was filled up with just the entity, the pale face smiling its eerie grin while holding the candle. Tyler got up and yanked the cord from the TV, cutting the power immediately. But the TV turned back on, and the entity laughed with a gargled voice before snuffing out the flame of the candle, and the screen turned to black. All 3 of these friends witnessed this and told Sarah about it during the week, all before the 3 friends were considered mentally unstable. They began to wander into places randomly, muttering under their breath and always hiding in the darkest corners of any location, including their own houses and rooms. It seemed so unusual and tragic for the families. They had no idea why it was happening. Sarah, however, kept everything a secret. She knew the board was still in her house. She knew it was her fault for starting the seance, and her fault that she brought it up herself for a stupid dare. To this day, she keeps the blame to herself, but won't bring it up to her parents or her friends' families in fear that the pale entity is listening and watching her every move. As for the friends, all 3 of them speak just one phrase, no matter who they're talking to. I hunger, I crave, I devour. No progress has been made, and it is with unfortunate news that Sarah has disappeared, and it was a few months ago when this all happened. She has not been seen since.
A strong cautionary tale that is an example of what happens when average people reach out to things beyond their understanding.
It's just so terrible. I've noticed something similar to a few cases we've studied now, though. These evil entities choose to keep the victims alive, but in a constant state of stagnant confusion. They're able to stay alive through the help of those around them, but their mental state is elsewhere, lost to the wind.
To the winds of the ethereal plague that brings them closer to the demonic entity of which haunts this town. Additionally, this pale creature reminds me of 2 other entries which we've covered.
Yeah, exactly. The first being that pale creature who hunted down that hiker with the help of some invisible force, as well as the creature that crept into the attic of that teenager who stayed home alone for the weekend. They both seem to resonate that same sense of awestruck terror.
as well as the odd creature part of Potter's Hill ancient history, striking fear and even death in the townsfolk. There's no mention of the cult's triangle in this entry, however, so that's a curious factor.
Perhaps the demonic entity of the witch cult sends out multiple possessed creatures at once, on certain nights at least, and maybe some of these entities end up becoming lost of their cause. I'm not sure. It's just too ominous.
Like the Red Moon, to instill the most terror all at once and feed on the essence of fear, even over time. This may be a grave discovery.
Right. So, just so many victims that are stuck in that mental haze. It's truly horrifying to think of that. An entity that seeks to cause lifelong chaos and fear.
And some that are summoned by simple games and encouraged by teenage pranks. The realm of the ethereal can be closer than some may think.
Then we only have a limited time before this demonic entity strikes out again, just as ferociously as before. I'll be preparing for this tonight, and probably for the next few days too. The dangers of the paranormal are ominous.